Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 4 of the Level Up Symposium. My name is Emily Susanna, and I'm one of the co-curators of the symposium, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Coyotes and Cheezies, the integration of animation into live theater, presented by the Associated Designers of Canada with support from ToasterLab's Mixed Reality Performance Atelier. As one of the co-curators of the symposium and a member of the ADC, I can't tell you how excited I am to be here hosting and participating in this event. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Tchage, the unceded land of the settler city of Montreal, which long before the colonizers arrived was a place of conference, conflict, and creativity for many Indigenous peoples, including the Kanien'kehá:ka, Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Abenaki peoples. I am honored and humbled to be here and create and share with you all, and so I offer my thanks. It is in a spirit of gratitude that I would also like to acknowledge the support of the Canada Council for the Arts, our primary funder of the symposium as a whole, as well as our other sponsors: IATSE, the University of British Columbia, Theatre Alberta, CITT Alberta Chapter, Concordia University, Ryerson University, York University, and all of our individual donors. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today. You are watching this Level Up live stream either on the Level Up website, levelup.designers.ca, on HowlRound at howlround.com through our partners at ToasterLab, or on the respective pages for the ADC or ToasterLab. Regardless of your viewing platform, embedded on the same page as the video is the chat function in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Questions can be asked in the chat at any time and will be read out to, I guess, just Kim and myself during the Q&A portion of the session or at any time as they come up. If you have technical difficulties at any point in the session, you can always send an email to levelup@designers.ca for immediate support. This event can be enjoyed through auditory or visual access, or a combination of both. Visual access is supported with captioning for myself, and captions will be added to our guest in the archive version. Captions for me will appear directly under me. You can see them right here. If you require technical assistance to support your access, please direct message the Level Up Tech in the chat, or again, email levelup@designers.ca. If you enjoy this session, please consider donating any amount to the Associated Designers of Canada to support our National Arts Service organization in achieving its goals of advocacy, mentorship, and industry promotion. Donation links are available on all viewing platforms and on our website, the ADC's website, or canadahelps.org, so please consider donating. All right, we have got all of the announcements out of the way. Thank you for your patience with all of them. I am very excited to introduce our guest, a very dear friend and collaborator of mine. Kim Senclip-Harvey is a proud Syilx and Syilxoteen with ancestral ties to the Dakel, Secwépemc, and Tanaka communities. She is an Indigenous theorist, cultural evolutionist, and storyteller whose work focuses on the ignition of Indigenous power and innovating methodological processes with artistic sovereignty to create joy-centered narratives that nourish the spirits of peoples oppressed by the imperial state. Kim creates artistic ceremonies to protect and evolve Indigenous cultures, and believes that stories are the most powerful tool we have to provide every organism the opportunity to live peacefully. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you. Did you almost say orgasm? Because sometimes I say that. And I think I need to go back and change that because sometimes people say orgasm. Sorry to start there.
That's a good tip when you're writing your bio. Try to make it so that your presenters won't say that you encourage orgasms in
for everyone peacefully.
Yep.
Organism. I've said it on live radio myself, so I'm sorry, everyone. I'm going to change that. I'm going to be a good dramaturg and self-editor and go back. Thank you for that intro. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Level Up. Thanks, everyone. I'm so excited to be here, Emily.
Me too. I mean, Kim and I have worked together for quite a few years now, so any excuse to chat is always a welcome one. But we're going to be talking in a somewhat pointed discussion today around animation in theater, how we work with live animated characters, how we integrate them into the work, and then on a broader sense, how the work that we've done and the work that Kim is really innovating works in like an anti-colonial, anti-traditional theater, innovative, holistic way. That's Connor Moore just posted a fantastic comment. Connor has worked with us. He knows that he would expect nothing else from the two of us.
We're starting my lab with orgasms and organisms. And how do we make visual storytelling around that? Hello, everybody. You're welcome.
Yeah. So I think maybe first, if we talk a little bit about Kamloopa, because that's the first piece we worked on together.
Yeah, where do you want to start? What do you want to like? For me, I just was like character wise, because I think it's really important, because I think when we talk about visual storytelling, it's like, why projection, why visual? And I don't think people think about that often. I get frustrated when it's like the 90s projection where it's just like those kids sticker books, like a sticker book in the background, and it feels very like, ooh, a rainbow. And it's like, where is that rooted? Why is that necessary? You know, I had producers on Kamloopa say, do we need the visuals? Do we need the projections? And I was like, yes, like they are a full character, they are a full world, they are a full life. And for me, it's the multi-dimensionality of creating Indigenous storytellings, of presenting and offering this mystical nature of, yes, live performances, but also how can we create mysticism within the production? And for me, I was looking for a designer who had the capacity to execute on something quite large. It felt like casting an actor, because I was asking the visual designer, the visual storyteller, I was looking for somebody who could bring to life the raven, the coyote, the ancestors, the wind, the grizzly bear. How could this character that I saw in Kamloopa come to life? These characters, this world, and Emily was up for the task. I remember asking people around, and I just wasn't looking at people's work that I was excited or our aesthetic matched. And I remember Emily sent me this, what do you call them? They're like your lookbooks, basically.
Oh, yeah, they're like my visual inspiration. Whenever I'm working on a project, like my personal design process is I read the script a bunch of times, and then I scour any modern art, photographs. I just scour Google Images for a few days and collect anything that vibes with me. And then when you do that, I'm able to start to see there's clearly themes that instinctually make sense, you know, there's these tensions in Kamloopa of trying to figure out who you are and where you come from, and the tension between the man-made city of Vancouver and actually being on the land where they end up. And so, you know, I always put together these sort of visual guides of where you start out in your process. So I sent one to Kim after reading the script a few times.
And was blown away. I don't even think I'd talked to you on the phone, but I said to the producer, hire this person. Wherever they are in the world, hire them. Because Emily has a way of, and I think this is really important, of reading a script in a way that performers have to go beyond what I've stated on the page. You have to make offers and innovations and possibilities. And that's what I saw in what you offered in that package. I said, she's got the themes, she has understood the journey, the aesthetic, the tone, and also your like international conscientiousness, knowing that I was a Indigenous creator, you are not an Indigenous person, but making offers, which is like hands full, coming to the table about how we can solve this problem together. It's too much work to work with producers or designers who are constantly asking Indigenous people to solve all areas of the interdisciplinary, international work that is required when you're collaborating. And for me, I said, here is a person, here is an artist who not only has the capacity, but the rigor and the innovation to execute on something that I really hadn't seen before. I don't know, like, I don't know. I didn't see a lot of Kamloopas before, and I didn't see a lot of video integration in that way before. And so it was also a little bit jumping into the dark. And so I don't even know, I don't think I've ever asked you like how scared or terrified you were to do Kamloopa. But Emily came into residence at Western Canada Theatre and was with us for the whole creation process, which I think is just standard practice for us now for how we work, because it is so generative, because it is a conjuring, because it is a collaboration. And most often you're either like right behind me or right beside me, so that I can take a look at what's going on in your monitor and I can take a look at what's going on in the stage, so that in my brain, these worlds are coming together like this in action, because it will feel like a sticker. It will feel like a facade. It will feel topical if it's not integrated throughout the process. And that was really important to me. And we just played well together. You know, it's like play dates when you're kids, and we played really well together. So we keep on making play dates.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your experience from that, from a practitioner sense, when a director is like, what should I give me this?
Yeah, I mean, like it's always, when you're approaching something that you care about or feel special in the way that Kamloopa did, like it is always scary. And you know, working on a piece where you yourself don't have the like cultural knowledge, right? There's a lot of like openness that you need to have as a practitioner, but then also the team. Like when I arrived in Kamloops, you know, everyone was really, really open. The first day was like actually like a feast, the first day of the production. And I remember getting there like super jet lagged because I was working out on the East Coast. So it was like the entire country's worth of like time difference. And I remember like there's elders and I was trying to introduce myself. And I was basically like, I, Emily, video tired. But there was like such a sense of welcoming and trust amongst the team that I think we all built quite quickly, that then percolated into the work. Because working the way that we did in Kamloopa and the way that we strive to work on our other projects, there was a lot of trust and a lot of openness, because people were showing work that wasn't done, right? Like it's really easy to fall into that trap if you haven't gotten things to the point where you want to show people, so you like keep them to yourselves and you're guarded. And that's like a way to work in a theatrical system that I don't think either of us believe should exist anymore. Versus when you're open and sharing all the way along through the process, things get integrated, ideas percolate and come from places that you wouldn't expect. And Kim, you and I, when we were talking, I think last week about this conversation, we got into this like a little tangent about like how what we're doing often is called devised creation, but like it isn't devised theater. Yeah. It's very different than that, because it's not just that like we're all, you know, everyone is, you know, everyone's the set designer, everyone's the projection designer, everyone has agency and responsibility for the department that they're in. You know, like if a projection doesn't work, I'm not going to like go out and say, well, that was like Daniela's idea, by the way, which is why it looked bad. You know, like I still am responsible for what goes on the stage in my department, but there's like an openness of spirit to take ideas from other places, to work collaboratively, and to make things in a really non-hierarchical way.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think it's like, it's so important that we talk about the nuance around process and non-hierarchical, around what this actual collaborative creative practice is that I think sometimes when we get into trouble in these situations where we're trying to decolonize practices, it's too easy to come in wanting to do be a part of everything, because I feel like Indigenous practitioners have also been positioned in the Canadian theater community to be extracted and left out of conversations. And so all of a sudden on the first day, it's like, here are all the costumes, here are all the set, here are all the artistic decisions that have been made. And so as we move into this next sort of wave of methodology of creating Indigenous with international collaborators, it's like, how do we trust that process and understand it? And for us, and for me, within the fire creation methodology, you were fire starters, igniters, creators, sustainers. There were departments. You have authority within your department to create. It doesn't mean that the performer is also going to make design decisions, but they can inform that. But that, to me, what I'm realizing in reflection is that there's the real collaboration is actually is removing the systems and obstructions between the designers. Then normally in Canadian theater, the designers are first seeing the costumes on that first share day, being like, oh, it's interesting that Jim over there did that set. That's all black. And now I guess I should go look at my all black costumes. Wow. And the performers are looking at it for the first time going, oh, whoa, that is going to inform my character. And so for me, what I'm realizing is it's so important to have the designers speaking very early on. And for example, with the Healing Company, with Break, we're like 2 years, maybe 3 years out. You've been hanging out for a year now. We're on WhatsApp, Slack. We have a G Drive for all of you to start sharing the process of what that is like. It requires, and this is what Emily and the Healing Company and the Fire Company had in spades, was trust with regards to the process, trust with regards to the agency that all these departments need to have. Dismantling the hierarchies of Canadian theater is not equally sharing power between the team. It's equitably ensuring each artist has what they need to execute in their department. And that is very different than a sort of communal equalness in the room, which is not at all what we're going for.
No, and just that sparked a memory of one of the things that we did on Kamloopa, which I haven't experienced since and hadn't experienced before, is we invited the actors to some of our production meetings. And when it's kind of, that statement I find is a kind of interesting litmus test when I describe it to people, because people are either like, oh God, you brought the actors to a production meeting, or they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And the thing is that we invited the actors because the actors deserved to know what was happening. And it also
when you say it's like, yes, as a performer for 10 years, I'm like, yes.
and it would help inform the room, right? Like, if the actors don't know why our table mechanic for our breaking table gag isn't working because the magnet that we ordered isn't here and we're trying something else, XYZ, it just feels like, why isn't this happening?
Yeah.
What are people doing? Why aren't they prioritizing the things that we need to rehearse with? Whereas being able and invited, the spirit of openness, I don't think any of them said anything for the meeting because they didn't really want to.
A little bit. Like, I think there was a costume thing, and this is what also was a time saver. And then they were like, well, let's go ask this person, let's go this person. Caitlin was like, oh no, I can do that. And then I think Sam said, like, well, and I can do that. And the problem got solved in 30 seconds, which is probably why people don't remember it. But that would have taken a week of like this person talking to this person, and I'll come in and watch. It's like the actors also have knowledge and embodied experience that needs to be honored. And for me, having them at these production meetings is imperative. At least what you're seeing in the openness of Spirited, because it's them out there. It's their bodies out there once we're gone. And boy, did they deserve to know everything that's going into making sure that we're doing everything we can, even if we fail them, because we will not protect them for the whole thing, that they know how hard the production team works for them.
Yeah, and this shared empathy, was also enforced by we would check in at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And, that's not something that's unique to our production. Other people do that as well. But, it was really meant to be that if someone was saying in the morning that they needed more space, you knew what was you might not know why they needed more space, but you'd be able to respect where they are. And there's this like spirit of continuously checking in so that people have the agency, you know, to do what they need to do and take the time that they need. And it can be easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, well, if we work that way, we're never going to get anything done. But, you know, we did get it done. People, you know, sometimes would be like, I can't come in, I need to take a morning.
Yep.
And if they take that morning, they're going to work, let's say, twice as hard in the afternoon because they're energized and they're present, fully present in the space, versus keeping this very closed off structure where it's like, these are the hours we work every day because these are the hours that we have to work. You know, this is a traditional production schedule. It's not actually as productive, I think, as people think it is. Taking the time that you need is going to work better. Like anyone who's worked with me knows I'm not a morning person in any realm of that statement. So, you know, early on I was like, hey, is it okay if I like am a bit late? And Kim was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. And I was 100% more productive in the afternoon than I would be if I was forced to come in for like 9 a.m.
And that you also work late. So I was getting to know your schedule. You have a different schedule, and that's not bad, worse, lazy, or off the clock. Like you probably worked some of the most hours on that production. You were there till like 3 and well, it wasn't a Morocco Union House. The designers like you were working a lot of hours, and it was my responsibility to me to not be an absent creator, a dictatorial director, an oppressor of systems. To me, strong leadership. Respectful leadership, living within my values as a Salish Plateau is understanding the practitioners who I have the honor of collaborating with. For me to impose some kind of like clock into the coal mine and get these fucking projections done is so oppressive. It's so imperialistic. It's so violent. And for me, if my job is to create a compelling piece of work, is to move society in the story, I better damn well understand what artists need to be able to do that. And that's why, to me now, the vetting process also of working with collaborators is quite intense, because I have been taken advantage of with regards to some processes of artists thinking that they do get a say in everything or that they can tell other departments what to do. You know, for Kalupa now and Break, I'm being very particular because you have to be courageous enough, trusting enough, respectful enough, and innovative enough to actually work within this process. Because I trust my designers so much. I go for bat for them all the time because they're the first people in the world. They build the world. They build the world. So you should give them what they need to do their jobs. Like, what are we doing? Like, I just can't. If somebody told me that I had to write from 9 to 5 every day, I'd be like, fuck you. Like, I write when I work. And so for me, it's like, how can I understand or dismantle not just the hierarchies, but the obstructions for artists to be able to execute with excellence? And Emily, I know you did that so swimmingly. And I knew you were working, you know, same with Chris Dirksen, same with Daniela. I always said, this is not grade 2. Please don't tell me if you have to use the bathroom. Please don't tell me if you need to feed yourself. Please don't tell me if you have to go work. Like if you think it's important or you're interested, they'll talk to the stage manager and say, it might be useful to come back around here. But we also had WhatsApp. So I'd say, hey, I think this might be of interest to you, but also you are the expert of your own artistry. Why would I try to dictate that for you?
Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. And then in that spirit of also of sharing openness and practices, one of the things that we did that I think is really interesting in regards to projection and these live animations was when we were integrating the actors into it, they were able to really see every step of the process, right? Like we were showing them things when they weren't done. We would be able to like say like, hey, come out, hang out in the audience, and we're gonna play these scenes, and you can look at what's actually happening around you, because a lot of time, you know, and this is a mentality that's easy to fall into when you're not an actor, is like you have the actor and they sort of like move around the space and then like you do the stuff to them instead of working with them. But it's not fair to create these environments around actors and they have no idea what's going on, and then you're expecting them to make informed choices, right? If they don't know the lighting cues and don't know the projection cues and they're just sort of like having to exist, you know, like if we wanted that, we would just get mannequins, right? Like there's no
and I think too, when you say that, I think it's important to understand that whatever your method is to create multiple entry points. You know, in theater, there's never enough time, there's never enough money, there's never enough process, especially when tech comes around and projections are the thing. If you're going to be doing projections, you better damn well give those guys enough time and those cats enough time. And I think it's the responsibility of juries and bodies and producing companies to really understand that you cannot tech even a small projection show the way that we do it in a day or two. You cannot. That would be like giving an actor half a day to tech the whole show. It's just not fair. And I think what we do in our method with regards to having the Google Drive and check-ins and looking at the work, all the performers have access to all of that. How did that make you feel with regards to having performers and actors and people like in your business way before what's expected?
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those things. I was I was joking about this actually with Andrew a few weeks ago. It's like there's, and bear with me if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan. There's two hobbits inside of you. One is Gollum and one is Schmeagol. And you know, the Gollum hobbit is going to be like, no, my works is show no one's is, it's not done. But you don't want to be like Gollum. You want to be like Schmeagol and hang out in your little boat all happy like.
That's a great analogy. And another side is my first tattoo, which I got, which was live. I don't even know how to do this. I'm a mere. Anyways, that font is Elvish from Lord of the Rings. So I am here for those analogies.
And so it can be really scary to put your work out there when it's not done. And like, you know, like a very small example of this is like, so there's a lot of animals in Kamloopa. And, you know, I'm working on this bear and when I'm animating it, it doesn't have any fur. So it looks pretty weird because fur is really render and intensive and et cetera, et cetera. And so the actors come by and they're like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's a bear, and I'm working on it. I'm like, oh, we can like brush its fur together. But it'd be really easy just to be like, no one look at my horrifying polygon bear. It's trust that, not only trusting that you're going to get the work yourself to where it needs to be, but it's this trust and this level of faith in your collaborators, because it's really easy to go from, oh, I can't show anyone anything because it's not done, to being like, I don't trust that you can figure out that it's not done. Yeah. Right? I think you're going to think poorly of this work because you're not able to envision what it's going to be. So by staying open, and it is work to work in an open way, like you're constantly keeping a check with yourself. And when thoughts do come up, if someone says something and you're like, internally you're like, Mrr. You're like, why am I feeling that? Where is that coming from? It's that hard work for any amount of like trying to improve yourself, right? It's never going to be 100%. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm going to turn on the openness switch and now I'm 100% okay with everyone looking at my work all the time. You have to, when you start to feel like you're like, oh, I don't want to show this. It's like, well, why do you not want to show it? And how can you like work through that? And what can you show? Maybe you're really not ready to show that, and that's okay because it's still too personal. But like, is there something along those lines that you could show, or how do you communicate that to the rest of the team?
I think that's so important, Emily. And I think it's about this reimagining the relationship between the and really understanding, deeply listening to designers' processes with regards to that they share the vulnerabilities of a performer, and that it is a process. Like, and that the relationship between performers and creative teams and the artistic leaders on that show have to really respect and understand that process. You know, I've been on a production where somebody like laughed at one of the designers, or like, is that it? And I was like, oh my God, like that's your approach. This is such a vulnerable state, or you're not honoring that they need time or whatever. It's also like, that just got me thinking about this notion of like when a really special a projection comes up or a sound, like we give performers closed set days, you know, that could be something that we integrate to think that how do we really honor the vulnerabilities it requires for all artists, not just performers, to get their job done. And for me, it was like a very simple, like, the bear's not going to be buck naked, right? And you were like, no. And I was like, great. And then we just moved on. And then the bear evolved, because I wouldn't ever ask a performer on their first take, is that how you're going to do the scene? That's so absurd. And we would just never do that. So I think it's important as artistic leaders, we understand how we create the space for designers to be in that play box, to be in that vulnerability. And I just know you're going to execute on what's required. But I think too, like, you have to constantly, as an arts leader, be like celebrating your designers each day, because it is tough. There are days when the designers go and like, that was a rough day. That was a tough day. You know, we didn't get to where we needed to. I don't know if this is where we're going. And for me, I think in those check-in and check-outs, what really was important, especially for the design, was making sure the designers had what they needed. And that I wasn't an absent director that made designers try and catch me at the end of the day, talk to me over breaks, that they had to schedule an appointment, that I was intimidating to approach. Like for me, I'm there off the top. I'm there for an hour at the end of the day, at least past when all the designers leave, just in case they want to call. Because I think for me, being a performer and being in a colonial Canadian theater rehearsal hall, so often you have conversations after conversations. You don't need to be talking about a designer. You need to be talking to the designer. You don't need to be talking about the content. You need to be talking with the content, with the collaborators, with the performers. And for me, in the decentralizing the hierarchy and power of decisions, it's not a like show to the director and the writer, and then they go away and go like, like, it's so rude to me. I would feel so awkward. It's like, what do you think, Emily? How is this informing your practice? Where do you think we need to go? If I hired you to give me your lifetime in artistry, I damn well better have the courage to also integrate you in the process to help create this thing together. And you said something on one of the shows we work with where you were like, once you gift a show to other people, it's not yours anymore. And that, I think, is in a Canadian structure that really it's hard for directors and writers and creators to understand that. You know, once Kamloops, we gathered and people were getting paid and people were flying across the country, even Outbreak with the Healing Company. It's not mine anymore. And that notion of understanding, how do I disseminate power? How do I disseminate authority? How do I foster courage is the work. And I fail at that often, and I work at it every day, and I succeed at it, and we succeeded, and we collaborate, and we talk. But if people don't want to get mucky, if they just, I can't work with designers who just want to show up and do their old tricks. That to me is not collaboration. That to me is not creating something new for this moment. And that's something that you have in spades. You're always ready to say what is required of me in this moment. And that is the profound respect I have for designers and artists who are constantly unfolding and making offers and giving presence and generosity and respect to the whole collaborative process.
Yeah, and I think that really speaks as well to the being able to be in residence. And like, it is a privilege monetarily, time-wise, to be able to gather your artists together in a place where they can all create together. And I mean, it feels extra like a privilege right now, because we've all been in our apartments for almost a whole calendar year.
And I think it's important to talk about that, particularly with regards to international, Indigenous and non-Indigenous collaboration. We have been creating in a white supremacist theater sector for basically almost ever, really. Like using imperial methods, Western Eurocentric methodologies to create even Indigenous stories. So when we're in this era of creating and understanding and evolving and honoring Indigenous aspects in this anti-racist, equitable work, it is going to cost more money. It is going to require more time. It is going to need to have artists in residence so that non-Indigenous artists can see how we work within an Indigenous paradigm. You know, I think it's that witnessing that is required, that you can't just show up on a Tuesday and be like, you know, when do the lights need to be hung, and come back on a Monday. You're missing the practice of creating, particularly for me as a person who creates artistic ceremonies, the process of creating that way. And that requires enough money so that designers don't have to hodgepodge a salary together, which is total bullshit. They're doing 3 shows at once. They get a full salary to work on this show like everybody else is. Like, why designers aren't getting that boggles my mind. They get the time and respect to be in the room so that they can actually collaborate, and that they understand that their presence is like omnipresent, that I don't need them clocking in and out all the time, but that they do have to be available to be here, inquire. Usually, I think on Kamloopa, y'all would come to the checkouts, so that if you were away for the afternoon, you'd come back and recenter and be like, okay, what happened today? And then I'd say, what are your needs for tomorrow? What can I do with the stage manager now to curate and collaboratively create a day that makes sure everyone's needs are being met? And that's the decentralizing of power for me, is that's not just what do the actors need on stage, it's what do the designers need to get to tech where they aren't so stressed out, where they aren't left in the dark, where they aren't positioned to fail. Because I think designers and international collaboration are often positioned to fail, and I won't fucking stand for it. It's disrespectful. It goes against my values as a Salish Plateau woman, and I just can't. I know I'm going to not be able to do everything in terms of creating a safe environment, but for me, it's like, and I'm interested, Emily, too, in how that decentralizing works for you in terms of ensuring that your needs are being met.
Yeah, I mean, first, actually, I want to, just because you mentioned failure, I'm just going to mention that, like, one of the things that when we're working with, particularly projection, but any of the elements, there's a lot of permission to fail, like, amongst the team. And that needs to be there as part of this trust and this openness and this honesty, because if it doesn't feel like you can fail, and fail in a way that's not going to be like, you hang up your hat and you go home.
Bye.
Then you're never going to have that level of openness that you're striving for. You know, sometimes you're going to put up a projection and it's going to look like shit, right? Like, it looked great on your computer, but it's dizzying when you put it on the walls. So, in the same way that we encourage actors to try things, with the idea that you can fail and we can do the scene again and we can work it till it's good. There has to be an openness amongst the design team also to fail, and that comes too with this being in residence, having time to work. You're going to be able to experiment, to jam, and put up test versions of things that, like, maybe don't work, and that's okay. And it's the feeling, like, really deep down in your core that it's okay, that need to be there. And there's a lot of experiences, and I think that there were elements of the design for Kamloopa that would have always been there, just by basis of the script and the beats and the story. But there's a lot of the feeling which wouldn't have been able to evolve without being in residence, right? Like, you can see pictures of the arbor at the powwow grounds of Kamloopa, but that's not the same thing as going there and feeling it. There's a tangible energy that, made its way into the set. It made its way into the projections, into the music, the acting, the costumes and regalia. Every aspect was informed by that. Or, there was times that we had, a fantastic jingle dress dancer come in, so that, we didn't have a section of the show where it's actually they're dancing in the powwow. They get to the powwow, but feeling that embodied energy from having this very generous individual come and teach a bunch of us how to, or attempt to teach a bunch of us how to dance. Because it wasn't just
did so good. It was so good. It was so good to watch and feel. It was one of my favorite days.
Yeah, me too. Or doing the bear dance outside.
Oh yeah.
And there were things there that informed the aspects of the design and the aspects of the creation. And there was this openness to, like, often when there's things that happen, like someone's going to come in and teach a dance, like the actors would do that. But as a designer, I'd be like, ha, 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 look, me and my computer are over here.
Roll work to do, director.
Yes, work. But the fact that, that happened a few weeks into our residency, and we'd created such a level of trust and openness and personal responsibility into the ethos of that room, that, like, everyone who was physically able to join in learning how to danced.
Yeah.
Right? And most of us looked kind of bumbling.
I did too, because I don't powwow dance too. But I was like, if I'm going to ask performers to do this or embody this, let's all do this together. This is the vibe of the show. Let's all play around with that. So I'm not asking you to create something that culminates in something we have no shared experience in.
Yeah, and coming into things like that as a person who's not Indigenous, like, that is something that's scary when someone's like, I want to teach you how to jingle dance. And I'm like, I'm not even sure I should be doing that. But there's
oh my gosh. I'm not even sure I should be doing that.
But there was such an openness in the room, and our lovely individual who was teaching, was like, no, this is for the people in this space, or on the very first day of rehearsal, Yolanda brought out her drum, and we were singing this song that was like sort of call and response. Like, there was, like, everyone would sing. And I remember being like, I don't even really sing on, like, a by myself. Like, this is terrifying. But there's something to just embracing that you're there, and you've been asked to be open, you've been asked to participate, and like, even if you can't sing, like I cannot, trying in this like spirit of giving, because it was a gift that Yolanda gave us, right? Her song was a gift. Her doing this was an act of her giving the entire fire company something very special that, could only come from her. So part of the receiving it is like putting yourself into a potentially internally scary place. Not like bad, dangerous scary, but just like
that good vulnerability scary that it's required to create art, I think.
And I think that it's really, really important when looking at international design is leaning into those moments of vulnerability and things that are scary. And like, comment from Maddie, yes.
I love Maddie so much. Who was saying Maddie was a stage manager. They felt very similar in the sense, is it okay? Do I have permission? She's talking about, the company allowing her to embrace this new experience, which is so good. And Maddie, I hope you and your loved ones are doing well.
Yeah. And it's, it really is something special to work in a way where everyone is bringing these moments of vulnerability constantly, day after day, in some way, whether it's a designer being vulnerable, sharing something new, or like our really, really ingenious sound designer and composer, Chris Dirksen, would just bring in their cello and, play live, just improvise. And some of that ended up in the show. But, it's that there's every designer, every actor, every member of the fire company was constantly being vulnerable and bringing openness and trust. And when they weren't feeling it, you know, maybe there's a day where there was more walls up, that would be acknowledged. And it really led us to create things a lot faster than I think we would have been able to otherwise, because we got a lot done on Kamloopa.
I think that's important to mention, that I think producers believe this way of working is less effective, and in fact, it's more efficient. And you can look at other models in terms of Google and Fortune 500 companies that actually look to ensure well-being is taken care of and that agency is taken care of. And there's a reason why they don't prescribe a 9 to 5, that you have to do a 9 a.m. check-in to ensure your employees are working for you, which is super oppressive. Those are just archaic 90s models that aren't effective anymore. Creating a fear-based work environment is actually anti-artistic. And so for me, if I'm studying leadership and studying how to create creative environments, it's respect, it's value, it's trust. And I think when you talk about this permission to fail, Emily, I'm so elated that that was present and we continue to do that. And I kind of call it this like method of generative failure, which is what we give performers, but that if we don't give that to designers as well in process, it's just really disrespectful to try and presume that they're going to give something on the very first try. But you talk about also, Emily, this personal responsibility. And I would love to hear more about what that means for you as a non-Indigenous person coming in, having the vulnerability, creating artistic practice, but what that means for you as a leader, because you've led on multiple projects now, the visual department, and what that means with regards to this kind of personal responsibility. But I just also want to honor, because Maddie was crucial to this process for me. I also want to honor stage managers in this process. I think in Canadian theater, stage managers are treated like dog poo, and I'm not here for it. Those stage managers have some of the most knowledge in the entire room, and Maddie had that. Maddie had that in spades, and I really looked to Maddie Henry, to understand, do we have it? And I think I remember the first time, Maddie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were like, what? You want to know what I think? And I was like, yes. You're in the script. You're going to be leading this once I'm gone. What do you think? And I think when it often tends to be women or non-binary or two-spirited people who are in stage manager positions, the oppression of directors saying that all they do is create schedules and that we don't actually talk to them about the artistic creative practice is pretty reckless and pretty disrespectful, because at the end of the day, the stage managers basically become the director after opening night. And so if you're not creating a relationship of reciprocity and literally handing over leadership to them, which should be a conscious practice so that everybody respects the stage manager once the director is absent, I think that's a failure of leadership. But I really love, Emily, and you have this embodied action to take personal responsibility for a project, for a practice and process. How do you do that? How can other designers work in a way that you are brave and accountable and you can veer in and out of other departments with respect? Where do you think that comes from? What did your mommy and daddy do?
Oh God. I don't know what they did.
And your cultural competency is also what I want to say here. That is also required. That even the language you just used, that Yolanda was offering a gift that you were to receive and participate. That's also the work of non-Indigenous designers to come into Indigenous processes, so they're not just like, I'm going to go take a smoke break when Yolanda starts singing a drum song or when somebody starts doing that, because I don't have time to teach cultural competencies. And I think too often organizations, artists, designers, producers, and juries unfairly position Indigenous, Black, and people of color artists, our artists to have to explain cultural competency. That is your work to go and do. That is your work to go and understand, to participate equally, respectfully, and without white supremacist notions, ideologies, and structures. And so I ask, how do you do that? Like, I never have to be like, Emily, don't. You know what I mean? Or like, Emily, we don't talk, you know what I mean? And you came in with that. And for me, that is also a requirement for working, because too often, people come in without that competency and expect me to have to explain anti-racist practice in such a nuanced way, not just like what's a smudge or not just what's a talking circle. What does cultural competency look like in creation international based practice? That's where we're at. And I don't find many people are at that level or stage.
Yeah, I mean, like, first of all, it is like all things where you're trying to work on yourself, like a constantly evolving practice. Um, I don't want to sound like I'm an expert in any of these things. But you know, it all comes down to, I think, like respect. Just respect, right? So, and that breaks, you could break that down into a few different things. You're respecting the people, you're respecting their artistry, you're respecting their histories, you're respecting their time. That's a big one. So, if there's something that I don't know, and I mean, like, this is a statement that applies to me for like literally everything, but is extra important here. Like, just fucking Google it. Like,
What you call the ye old Googles.
Ye old Googs. I love Googs.
Ye
I
old
know
Googles.
there's a lot of quagmire around like the ethics of a multinational search conglomeration with a reach into our daily lives. But just like Google it if you don't know something, right? And then when you Google it, look at the sources. You know, we're no longer at a time where you can't find things on the internet. You can find sources that are legitimate. You can, you know, don't just like read the CBC or CTV, you know. Check out APTN, right? Like get news from other places. Research. So like that's a huge respect of time, right? Because if there's something that I don't understand, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to research it and understand it to the best of my knowledge. And if I can't still get it, you know, then maybe I'll come and I'll say, hey, Kim, I'm really not understanding this. This is sort of where I am, but I'm not getting it, you know? And it's
humility that takes. The humility that takes, Emily. That's huge.
But it also means that if I've done like the base level of research, I'm not coming in, you know, being like, you know, Kim, what's smudge, right?
What are we smudging? But I think that's so important, Emily, because I will say, and I want you to keep going on this, but I will say one of the things that I feel like gets taken from me and disrespected the most is my time. By far, that is the greatest resource I have. It costs me the most amount of capital and money with regards to monetary, social, cultural, my resources. It's the largest resource that non-Indigenous people take from me all the time. They take my time, they don't compensate for it, and they don't thank me for it, and they position me to believe that I owe them this information, and I never feel that with you. I never feel that with you. You come hands full, knowledge big, humility great, courage ready. That is a remarkable artist.
Thank you. And like respect is also something that, you know, is constantly evolving. Like something that I know for myself is I get really excited in conversations and I tend to cut people off because I'm just like real jazzed about what we're talking about. And that's something that like I'm constantly trying to work on. Be like, Emily, let people finish their sentences, like to the end, to the period. Let people get to the periods of their sentences. Because usually, you know, like one word before they're there, I'm like, ooh, let's jam on that thought. And you know, like sometimes, like Kim, if you and I are talking, that's fine because
do it often. I do it with people that I'm pretty close with, like we're intersecting, overlapping. That's a different process. I'd say we do that often.
Yeah. But you know, it's something that like that's something I know where like I could be more respectful when I'm talking to people if I let them finish their sentences. That seems like an obvious statement, but it's something that I'm, you know, constantly working at. Like it's a constant thing, and I used to be worse, and hopefully now I'm a bit better, and hopefully 5 years from now everyone will be able to fully finish a sentence when I'm talking to them.
But I think you also learn me, and that's the nuance. Like that doesn't really bother me. I know that some people are like, you interrupt me often. I'm like, what I'm saying, if you get it, I respect that you're smart enough. You got it halfway through the sentence and you're going to dive in on that. It's a whole other segue. But I think for us, when we're jamming like that, it's kind of like when an actor's on stage and they're like, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go forward. I'm going to go back. They're not like, have you finished your line? Can I participate in the arting? Is it my turn to step into the light?
For the arting.
Is it my turn to be arting? For me, there's also got to be a generosity of assumption that I don't assume you're cutting me off because you're disrespectful. I know that you get jazzed and jacked. And so for me, I'm like, oh, Emily's on a roll. Let's let her fly.
Yeah. And I think that speaks really to like our personal relationship. I brought it up more just as like respect is something that you have to constantly work at, right? Like, even if you're like, I respect your ideas as another designer and I'm coming to you with respect and with openness, if I approach that, but I'm not letting someone finish their sentences, they're not going to necessarily, that's still not fully respectful, right? So it's being open and continuously working towards respect in like all those areas. And that's something that I try really hard as an artist. And sometimes you succeed and sometimes you fail, but it's not, I think that there can be a slippery slope of like acknowledging fail leading to apathy, where you're just like, well, sometimes I didn't do it, merp. But there's like acknowledging that you will fail, but then continuing to work. And that applies, also to the work that we're doing together, where we're talking about that permission to fail. It's like knowing that we're going to fail, but it's not like we're just going to like hang out in failure land forever. It's like something doesn't work and you try another thing, and maybe that doesn't work, and you try another thing, and you learn from those, as you were saying, these like generative or iterative failures, but that you don't stop. I don't think we stopped on Kamloopa at any point, like up to opening night, and then we hopped back in Vancouver, and we hopped back in Saskatoon, and things were continuously evolving, right? And there was a lot of love and a lot of stamina, and I think that also speaks to when you're working in a process that's decolonized, that's respectful, where you're creating art where everyone feels valued and is interested, people work harder. There's been shows where I've designed it, and after talking with the director, I've like gone to a separate room and like just cried, right? Because like, yeah, I mean, that's a statement of where things have been, and particularly like, that was years ago. When you're just starting out, it's hard to find your voice as a professional, and particularly I find a professional woman when you're dealing with much older men. It can be very difficult to not let yourself be berated.
They just do it so easy. It's just like they just feel like they have this ability to oppress. Like it's almost on their daily to-do list. I don't understand we're starting to stop them, but it's just so natural to them to just do that.
It, don't even notice it, and when their designer comes back 20 minutes later after like crying in a storeroom, and they're like, oh yes, you're back, great.
I hope you learned something. I hope you're back to create something great now.
Yes, but like those are shows, where that's your contract, right? You're like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I hate you. You probably hate me. We've reached a simpatico of hatred. That's okay. You yelled at me a lot. Here's your design. Give me my check. Let's never talk again. And
a simpatico of hate.
Because like sometimes you're working with people that are awful to you, and like now, and particularly after Kamloopa, where we made something in a good way and learned, wow, you can make things this way and the art doesn't suffer and it's great. Like that's not behavior that I would accept anymore. When you're just starting out, you just graduate school. And I think that, a lot of our arts educational institutions also condition you to accept this response. So you take it because, maybe this artist is visionary or they're well respected, or any of those things that people say when they're like, they're a terrible person, but the art they make is so great. I mean, like, I really don't care. If you're a terrible person, I don't want to work with you, even, if you're a visionary in our field, like whatever. If you can't treat people respectfully, then maybe you should divert some of your visionary power to being a non-shitty human being. But
Here.
Here. But when people are working in a way where they feel valued and loved and respected, they work harder.
They do.
We worked right until Kamloopa opened. Not because Kamloopa wasn't ready to open after our first preview. It was. It was great. But there was more, and we all wanted to work more.
Yeah.
I worked really long hours on that project, but not because Kim was like, Emily, where are my projections? I need more coyotes. I need more ravens. Where are my shadow trees? I worked hours on that show because I genuinely loved the show. And there's a statement that I say a lot when you're working with people and they often veer a little more to the tyrannical, which is, just because it's your passion project doesn't mean it's my passion project. And this often happens particularly if there's shows where, the budgets are a little bit lower and you're like, oh, but, work those 18-hour days because it's art, it's passion. And you're like, just because you care a lot doesn't mean that I have to devote my life to this.
Yep.
I'm going to be professional. I'm going to give you a good show, but I'm not going to work myself to illness for it.
Yep.
But with something like Kamloopa, it really became everyone's passion project. We were all working on it because we really, truly loved it. So when you treat people well, when you culture this atmosphere of respect, this atmosphere of love and creativity and truth and openness, people are going to work harder for you. They just are.
Yep. Absolutely. I think that was the thing when people ask, how did Kamloopa come to be? And it was for me, and I'd love to hear, Emily, what you think about this, but what's required when, we're to make offers to the sector, what is required of that core artistic leaders and leads and creators to ensure that this happens again? Because I get the same feeling on break right now. We just had a workshop where it's like everybody is working their tails off for this piece because we really believe in it, because we're creating this environment of reciprocity, of respect. And I think too, for me, that is the job as the artistic leader. That is especially when we're setting the foundation. How do I protect the fire company? How do I protect the healing company to ensure that they are getting the strength training, the creative opportunities, the resources? I make myself very accessible so that they can ask questions, so that when we hit the ground, when the game starts, when rehearsal begins, when production happens, everybody has bought into it. And for me, I think what lacks in the sector and the rigor is literally just leadership training with regards to this. These are basic fundamentals in other sectors that the theater sector is so archaic with regards to how we create. If you're not studying other models, if you're not doing arts leadership training, if you're not doing leadership training, if you're not interfacing with the frontline workers of your organization and your practitioners like the designers often, then you're not making informed decisions. You're not making decisions that respect them. And for me, from coaching roller derby to directing pieces like Kamloopa and Break Horizons, the elements to creating works and worlds and environments for people to succeed is very similar. And to be honest, it's really not rocket science. It is what you say. It's respect, it's reciprocity, it's failure as a value. Because if you think that artists don't fail every day, I'd say Kamloopa is built on a pile of failures. It is. And I'm not ashamed of that. And that's not a bad thing. But the Canadian shame-based culture believes that failure is so awful. Any good play is built on failures. It's good ideas, bad ideas, and then you parse it down and you figure it out. That literally is the only road to success. And I don't think people really investigate that often enough. And I think the rigor that the fire company had was a result of us buying into a process, committing ourselves to an Indigenous-centered paradigm methodology. And the value of that was we just kept working. And that's the other thing I want to mention is the process of work being impermanent and continuous. Because Indigenous theater is not given the fair share of what Canadian theater is given, not the same resources. A lot of these new works are world premieres. We have to be working with our unions and our associations to understand that work is going to continue on. We might have crossed a bunch of red tape and red equity lines with regards to what's allowed, but I actually don't give a fuck because those those were built most often off of white supremacist or colonial-based frameworks and methodologies. So why am I being penalized as an Indigenous person, or why are BIPOC people being penalized when we're creating in our paradigms because they are not within the union guidelines? That's a fucking problem. And everybody, whatever we want to call it, made sure that we followed the values of what Kamloops needed. We were making adjustments. Actors were making line changes. In Vancouver, we excavated a scene. You know, costume was being worked on. Little jokes were being changed. An artistic ceremony is alive, and everybody understood that. It wasn't an opening night. Okay, bye everybody. We're out of here. Give me my paycheck. I'm done. And I cannot thank the fire company enough for giving so much of who they were to that piece. Kamloops would not be what it is right now, being studied at the level it is in universities and high schools and cherished within the Indigenous community without the rigor of the fire company, which is also why their name is on the front cover of that play. Because that's the other thing. You don't get to work this way and then not acknowledge that work, not respect that. And again, it's that embodied values. So often organizations want to put their values on the wall and say, I work with respect. How have you organizationalized that within your work practice? What does that look like embodied? To me, I feel shamed for myself that I'm not doing my ancestors correct if I talk about my values instead of living them. And the way the fire company embodied the values of what that piece needed blew me away. I still am in awe of it. I'm still so humbled and grateful for the work.
Yeah, and I think that there's something interesting with what you were saying, where, you know, like equity, like the equity guidelines didn't always, you know, work the best for our schedule or our methodology. But, you know, one of the interesting things is like equity and unions like that are there for the protection of the people in them, right? They're there because, and the reason they need to be there is to protect people who are in this inequitable system, right? If everyone treated their actors and directors and equity members with the respect and paychecks and values that they deserve as people and as artists, we wouldn't have the need for things like unions to dictate, well, no, you can't put an actor in a situation like that. That's dangerous. Or we need to get consent for this because that's not responsible. So, you know, coming into a situation like ours where we are creating things with respect, it's easy to see these systems as not working for us, but, you know, they are so necessary for like where a lot of Canadian theater is right now, because before they were in place, actors really weren't being treated with the respect and autonomy that they deserved, right? You know, it's the same thing with ADC or a PASC, right? Like without those minimums, people are constantly trying to lowball designers.
And that's the important thing. They were minimums. They are not best practices. You should not end your fiscal and report out and be like, hooray, everyone, we hit the minimums. That's well, we didn't want to come in last, but we came in second to last. Congratulations. They are minimums to protect basically slave labor environments, which they're based on the Industrial Revolution of 6 days a week, sometimes 10, and we have 12-hour tech days. What world are we living in? What world are we living in to accept that that's how we treat designers? So often in Kamloops, we would end the day early, sometimes an hour and a half early. Sometimes we'd have hour and 15 lunches. Sometimes we'd have longer 30-minute breaks. And so for me, it was like, I'm offering that I'm not working these people 40 hours a week or whatever their equity stipulations are. And therefore, there has to be a nimble responsiveness that if we need to work a little bit longer on this day or pass a little bit of break, know that I'm probably going to release them early, or that I ensure that all of them are getting way past equity minimums to ensure that, and I think arts leaders aren't taking enough responsibility for that. They're hoping that their artists have the capability and power to negotiate against these monolith institutions, and I think that's bullshit. As a director, as a writer, as a creator, it's my job to ensure that designers have everything they need to get to the production. If you don't know, even if you haven't done no check-in to say, Emily, do you have what you need? Are you getting a number that makes you excited to come to work? I know at least that when I come to work. And I think that is the decentralization of a white supremacist colonial model base that assumes we're going to treat people the worst. And that, to me, is what equity and that CTA is based on. It's bad policies created from bad practice. And when I worked for the government, those were the worst. Johnny on the spot came late one day. Now everybody gets a file write-up if they're late once. To me, that is page upon page of policy written from bad practice. It's anti-Indigenous because I don't approach my work that way. I approach that I trust Emily, I'm going to respect Emily, and that my values are going to ensure she's taken care of. I don't want to base any of my decisions on treating people oppressively. And that's where I have a problem. That's where people really struggle to understand, how is it that Kim creates? Why does she always ask for more money? Why is she asking to change the model? Because the model is based on oppression and slave labor practices, and we've become way too comfortable with it. We're way too comfortable with it. It shocks me. It's reckless and it's embarrassing.
Yeah, and speaking as a designer, like when I got my offer for Kamloopa, I mean, I think that not that I would have removed this much bargaining power, but I think I did say this to Kim on the phone when we were talking. I was like, I don't care what you pay me, just like get me out to Kamloops and I will work on this show, because I remember reading the script, and I was working in Parsboro at Chips Company, which is a lovely place at the time, and I was in this little cafe and on the complete other side of the country, and I read the script and it was just electric, and I was like, I need to be where this is. And flew over. But when I got the offer, it was like it was way more than minimums, and I was like, what? Like, what? But you immediately feel respected. It meant that I didn't have to worry, about like my rent that still is going to be happening in Montreal, because like I was only working in Parsboro for the summer, and like there's it removes. And this goes without saying, when you have enough money to make things go easier for you in terms of like making sure your apartment's still paid for and you can afford to get food, and you're not going to be eating your entire paycheck, because that's sometimes that does happen where you get, if I'm going to go work in Vancouver, the cost of living there and the cost of food and transportation and all of that is significantly higher than in Montreal. So, if I'm working in Vancouver, the dollars I'm getting paid actually are worth less to me while I'm there than they would be if I was getting paid in Montreal. So
I think as an arts leader too, it's my job to make sure that you can come into the room and your focus is on the work. Yeah, I think I have failed as a leader. If you're like, I don't know if I'm going to pay rent today, or I'm not going to be able to get all the food I need today. That means we've created a sector where literally people's basic necessities aren't being taken care of, and the art suffers. Their practice suffers. And that to me is just piss poor leadership, because the art suffers and then it's shitty art. It's uncompelling because somebody was worried about their rent and they created a whatever type of thing because they were like, fuck this, fuck that, simpatico hate. You don't respect me. I don't respect you. This was all about your egocentric vision. It had nothing to do with me. So we're all going to just sign in and do the work. That is the colonial, shame-based, ego-centered work that I just cannot participate in. But that's like way beyond the scope of what I'm supposed to be as a director.
Yeah, and that's something that, that happens a lot when you're a young, unestablished designer, right? Is that you're getting these like contracts for not very much money, which often demand, more work than contracts that do pay you well. Because often when you're in places that can only afford to give you, $1,000 for your design, chances are those places don't have the support systems there either, right? So if you're a costume designer, if you're only getting paid $1,000, you're probably also doing a lot of your own labor in terms of stitching and pattern drafting and shopping and pulling and all those things. Or, if you're a set designer, you're probably also going to be doing, a lot, maybe your own scenic painting, which in previous years would have been its own job. You'd have scenic artists who would be in residence at theaters. So when you're working these contracts where you're not getting paid a lot, you're also doing a lot more labor than if you were working at theaters that were paying you at very least the design minimums. Because, you know, as you said, Kim, those are minimums, but they are enough that, you know, a contract doesn't feel like you're being taken advantage of. But, you know, you're going to be doing more work, and it's also, when you're young, there's like no other way to get into the field. Canada doesn't have a system the way that Europe does, where you have the strong system of apprentices, where, you know, you're less experienced and you can work with someone and get your foot in the door in the field in that way. You know, and so what ends up happening is you have young designers, and theaters go, well, they're not very experienced. So, you know, we're not going to pay for that inexperience for you to learn on the job. So you get a terrible rate, but there's no other way to get into the field. We don't have, you can go to school, but then you're still going to have to enter the field at some point.
Yeah. It's really a positioning, you know, we're trying to address with Break Horizons, the Breaking Into Design initiative, because when we look at the statistics of how white designers tend to be, it's appalling. And the Canadian theater sector has much to repent for and pay for with regards to creating equitable opportunities. So the Breaking in Design initiative is an opportunity for young designers or new designers or just people, BIPOC people who are interested in potential design to come into a process like Break Horizons led by a BIPOC person of myself, an Indigenous person, and learn how we work that way. All companies should be having these level of initiatives to ensure that the door is open, that there are opportunities to enter the work. Otherwise, we are complicit in creating a racist and oppressive and like imperialistic, capitalistic opportunity where if you aren't privileged, you don't get to create art. And that's horse manure. I don't know why I said manure, but whatever.
I think that leads actually really well into a question we got in the chat, which is, what can designers working in conventional theater models do to improve the conditions for other designers and future designers?
I'm going to leave that to you, Emily. You're a designer.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that and this is something I'm always really open to. Sometimes people email me if they can shadow me for a bit. But being open to, if you can have an apprentice or have someone shadow you, having them. But also, I think that, and this is harder, but asking for what you need and then standing your ground. Because, and this happened, you know, kind of recently, where I was asking for a fee, or I was giving my fee to someone, and they're like, that's too much. And then I broke it down with hours, and I was like, but that's my fee.
Yeah.
And, you know, you understand that, you know, everywhere money's tight, but if you ask for what you need in terms of resources, in terms of fee, in terms of working conditions, and not that you're obstinate and hard to work with, but that you respect yourself and respect what you've asked for. Because if you start to backslide, then change isn't going to happen, right? The only way that everyone's going to get paid more money is that if there aren't people who are like, oh no, actually wait, I'll actually do it for $1,000. You know, it's asking for what you need and then sticking to it, I would say. So, and calling out inequity when you see it. I mean, that's a good day-to-day life thing too. But if you're working in a theater and things are inequitable, like, talk about it.
I think, Emily, you also just explained the notion of what integrity is. And being an artist with integrity, that you will not let people come for your dignity and the integrity of your work and your practice with lowball fees, or actually saying, I know that's what the cost, we can't pay you. So then you accept that at that point, and we need to remember this is the paradigm shift. If you're not getting compensated for the work, you're actually paying them to do the work. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people think about that often. And the integrity, have integrity, is to choose what's courageous over what's comfortable. Comfortable would be accepting the status quo. Comfortable would be allowing them to give you a lowball fee. Comfortable would be not demanding yourself to call out inequity. But Emily doesn't do that. I don't do that. We choose to act courageously, which is what integrity is.
Yeah, and it's hard. And like sometimes, as we've said a lot, you fail in something that you're going for, right? And I also want to be cognizant that now's a time where a lot of people haven't worked in a long time, or they haven't worked in the way that they used to work, and not in a good change, but perhaps in a scary change. And so it's even harder now if you're offered something and it's not in line with your principles or your needs. It's harder to say no. I think that the people asking for these things know that it's harder to say no. So, it's
so awful. What an awful thing to bargain against. They're like, we know you're in a tough spot, so we'll give you less. That's just awful.
And but like theaters are also in a tough spot, particularly institutions that have physical spaces, right? They've been paying rent with no income for quite a while. So it's hard, and it's difficult, and sometimes your integrity might falter, and it's knowing that, like, okay, maybe you make a poor decision, but that doesn't keep you from making better decisions later. Yep. Right? And all of this, everything we've talked about today, it's, and also, working on yourself as a person in general, it's checking in with yourself. It's knowing where you're at. It's, talking to yourself, right? Sometimes you make choices you like, sometimes you make choices that you don't, in design, in life, in your career. But it's doing the work to not like push feelings you don't like away, but like embracing them and bringing them to you and saying like, hey, why did we make this choice? Did we make this choice because we can't afford our rent, and like that's just where we're at and that's where our priority is? Sometimes that happens. That's okay. But striving to work with integrity, striving to work with honesty, striving to work with openness.
I agree with that entirely. There are concessions that will have to be made. I just did a workshop where I didn't get paid because I wanted to make sure my designers did. I had other funds and other ways to do that, but I don't like that I had to do that. I worked for it, but I failed in that situation. I worked 90 hours in 10 days and got paid this much money. But I wanted to ensure that my designers were getting the good fees.
And talking about that, though, like that's a scary thing, right? Particularly when we've just been talking about the importance of integrity and asking what you need, right? Yeah. There's also the honesty and the courage of talking about when things don't work. And I think that as as people and as designers, as artists, talking to each other about not just like when things work or ideals, but talking to each other when things don't work and you have made mistakes, and how those mistakes can be used in the future to make better choices or different choices.
I need a lighting designer. My light just went out. This is why you have to pay people to do their job. I don't know. Let me open this up. I had a lighting error. That's a bit better. One, yes. I feel like I look like Touched by an Angel. Whatever. I think, too, that's really important. And that's why designers also need to be talking to directors and producers and creating more environments where you can actually be honest about what's going on. But for me, bargaining against institutions and organizations who don't want to pay for work, we have Canadian theater, we have to do much better. We have to do much better. I also want to honor JH, who said this is amazing and reassuring. Indigenous designers have been fighting for all this for decades. I hear you. I can't imagine the mess and the muck and the racism that designers, Indigenous and BIPOC designers have felt getting us to this point. And I also want to honor that. I honor all of the designers, JH, yourself, and everyone included, who has put up with inequitable working environments, racist bargaining tactics, white supremacist processes without any acknowledgement or accountability from institutions who have done incredible harm to BIPOC peoples. And the only reason I am here is because of the hard, unpaid labor and often trauma of designers and artists who endured to even give me and afford this space. And I take that seriously every day. It's why I bargain hard. It's why I work hard, because I know many Indigenous femmes, peoples, and non-binary community members were not given this platform, not given this opportunity. And so you can say that I'm aggressive, you can say that I'm confrontational, you can say that I'm challenging, but it's because I'm in service to everyone who's been treated like shit since time immemorial with regards to Canadian theater practices.
Yes. And so I don't have a good segue from that, but
come on.
If anyone has any questions,
Emily, over to you.
Yes. And now, Kim, we're going to be approaching. I'm kidding. The ASMR section of
ASMR.
of Level Up. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm also going to throw up on the screen the list of the fire company, because we have been doing a lot of talking, and I think that it's important that we show these folks. So
look at that GIF. Look at that.
Also, I added a GIF of some fire because I am a designer.
I will give the presents to their name: Maddie Henry, Jessica Shaw, Marcel Chabasol, Lindsay Lachance, Danielle Macielis, Samantha McHugh, Chris Dirksen, Emily, Yolanda Bednell, Samantha Brown, and Caitlin Yacht. These are incredible performers, artists, designers, practitioners, community members.
And so this is the way and the order that they're formatted in the script. When you pick up your softbound copy of Kamloopa, which I encourage you all to do, on the first page, you'll have the list of the fire company. As a side note, when I was like a young theater person, I always wanted to have my name in a script where they were like first thing published by, like the first editions. So I can't think of a better script to have my name in. It's very, very pleasing.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And in this order, we did it in age. So we didn't do it alphabetical. We wanted to honor the knowledge. So it starts with Chris and Yolanda and Daniela, because that's also a protocol of honoring your elders and people in the room. But it was great I'm ecstatic and so honored to have all of your names in there.
Yeah, and something that I think is also interesting. So this list, you can see it starts off with fire creator, and then we move to fire igniter and tender. And then at the end, we have the fire extinguishers, because, Kim, you talked a lot about in this process and why it was called the fire company. We weren't just creating a play, we were tending a fire. And if you've ever tended a fire, there's the people who started and the people who tended and the people who extinguish it. And those are all equally important roles. So, we have we have our names on the left, and in the center, our roles in this process of continuous care and continuous work and continuous art. And then, our traditional theatrical concepts of what we all did. But I think that even having this metaphor or overarching purpose to what we created, helped all of us really centralize what we were doing, right? It's not just, the actors weren't just acting, they weren't doing the run every night. They were tending this fire that was burning until, its last night in Saskatoon. And then they very lovingly, carefully extinguished it. And, with fire, it's something that's really beautiful and really helpful, but also can be quite dangerous. And that knowledge of how do we keep this process safe? How do we keep things in a good way that, Kim, you spoke a lot about, and I think really resonated with the team.
I think having a methodology is something that I offer to BIPOC practitioners in particular, because white people have a method. we've been working in it. I think one of the reasons why Kamloopa and I think Break is working well is that they're methodologies that I went away as a theorist to think about and then put them in practical application to hold the work and the framework and the structure. It's best practice in many innovations or creations of new works that you have a methodology, that you go through proof of concepts, which we kind of just did with last week with the workshop with Break Horizons to do proof of concepts. And then also me as a practitioner to say, how am I creating frameworks to ensure that the work and the ceremony gets done in the way that aligns with my values and protocols as a Salish Plateau femme. And so for me, too often, I think practitioners or creators are like, I want to change theater. I want to do a new thing, and we're going to do it this way and this way, and really haven't done their diligence to understand that there's a very important aspect of methodology that has to be created and thought about. And the fire creation methodology is one you can read about on my blog. I think I did a podcast about it too. I'm working on one called Salish Earthing, which we're applying to the mystics. But really think, we're asking how can we help other Indigenous or practitioners understand is that you can't just create something new without a method, framework, or plan, even if it's very simple, like something you've written down on a Post-it to say, these are the structures that I think I'm going to enact to create outside of the normative Canadian framework. You can't just say, I'm not going to do that and then try and do something else. That becomes a reckless process where people are positioned to fail. People are positioned to not understand. And then scarcity mindset, fear, and shame start to come in, because I wanted to give people a firm ground to stand on, to understand that these were the roles. This is how I was thinking. I wanted to be explicit in how I was sharing it, because I was asking people to be extra vulnerable to creating a process where I think for people like, what the hell is a fire igniter? What the hell is a fire? What is this kid doing? And so we have to be explicit to be ethical and responsible as our arts leaders when we create and write pieces and want others to come and adopt them, which is why I say you can use the Canadian theater model. You can use it. You can indigenize it or amend it in ways that works for you. But don't just say, I'm not going to create that way, and then not have anything to take its place, because that can be extra scary for people. And I've been on pieces that do that, a piece that's done, and it's just too scary. It's too scary. So the fire creation methodology, you can read about it on my blog and podcast, is something that I am really proud of and continue to work, and will actually be one of the containers for my thesis work at the University of Victoria for my MFA.
Thank you. Just before we end off, I just wanted to throw this photo up.
Woo! Look at them animals.
Yeah, it's one of the shots. We actually have a few from Kamloopa.
Oh, that scene. Can you talk a little bit about that scene?
Yeah, so this was a scene where there was like a big culmination between a few of the characters. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of words being said that were filled with, like, there's a lot of anger in this scene.
Yep.
But in the end, like, these characters, they really do love each other, like even in these moments of anger. And so we had this tent that they disappeared into because, in the great planning of Micaiah, she only brought one tent for the three of them to sleep in. One very small canvas tent.
From the 1950s, apparently.
And so at the end of the scene, after all these things have been said, and like, I don't want to spoil too much, but there is a dress that's made out of like tuna fish lids. There's a lot of comedy and a lot of anger. They disappear in, and there's animals that, you could say that these animals represent the characters, but that's not it. The animals are the characters. They are the ancestors. This is just like another way that they're being presenced. Like Micaiah is the raven, and it's important not to think of like, oh, like she's connected. No, like she is the raven.
Edith. Edith is
the raven. Sorry. Yes, Micaiah's the coyote. And Kalana is the grizzly bear. And we were working with how do we connect visually these moments. And so here, as they go into the tent, the like shadows of their animal presences appear and walk in and settle down. And, there was a lot of anger when they were walking around in person. And then in the tent, though, you can see that like they're shadow animals on the side of the tent, these reflections. They're all hanging out together. It's all like there's still a lot of love. And there's
you timed it so that when each character went in, they silhouette the animal each night. This is the scene that people still stop me on the street and go, oh, that scene with the animals in the tent. And it was just, to me, a culmination of why Emily, the way she works, is so powerful. But the use that we could have not had it, but to me, it was the multi-dimensional layering you did. That this wasn't written in the script. You just did this because you were like immersed in the world. I think it's like there's some like animals were there, but it was phenomenal.
And like the set as well, was so transformative. So it starts out. I'm not sure if I have a picture of it starting. Oh, no, kind of. You can see there's like actually sort of stiff walls, and there's a lot of, this was at a very like lighting and projection heavy moment at the top of the show. But they were in this like kind of realistic living room in the way that there was walls and stuff. And then we went to this sort of outside area. So we have like canvas on the walls, and there's a lot of movement, and we still have this big portal, which if you've gone to Kamloops and you've been to the powwow grounds, there's this really big arbor, and then so at the end of the piece when they get there, the whole set would transform, these pillars would turn, the fabric would be gone, and we'd just be left with the arbor and the pillars. And Daniela did such beautiful work in that transformative nature, but that was all of our departments. We were all trying to figure out how do we layer things. So, yes, it transformed into the arbor at the end, but the arbor was there the whole time. It was the foundation of their apartment. There was always these levels of interconnectedness, and with the shadows on the tent in the first act, when they're in their apartment, almost all the projections are shadows, and they were designed so that you could like blink and miss them, so there'd be a shadow off of the fridge and it would turn into a raven, or like a tree would grow out of something, and it was meant to be, like there's whispers of where they are, because it's all these places are not just like related, they're like stacked, like temporally, locationally, like they're all, it's working with like the multiverse in terms of existences, and that's something is also very present in Break, but that Kim does really, really well, is creating these different layers of meaning and existence that all are happening simultaneously. And so as a designer, being able to work with all of these different layers and figure out how to presence them both individually and simultaneously is really, really interesting.
You did such a phenomenal job. Even at the fight when you had the animals behind them, I was like, how are they going to do this? This says the coyote and the grizzly are fighting at the same time as Makai and Kalana. And when Kalana took to standing, you had the grizzly come to standing behind them. And so it was really, I always go like this. Like my work is like this. So I'd like go to the designer and I'd be like, I need more of this. I just need this. They'd be like, okay. They get what I was talking about too. So it's like creating a vernacular with your designers around. The English language fails me often. So how can I make sure that I'm communicating it so I'm not like, oh, well, you didn't get what I was going for? That I make sure that I do my due diligence to be able to articulate, communicate, and ensure they have enough of what they need to go and play. And y'all played so well together on this.
Yeah, and like play is, exactly what we were doing. It was a lot of fun to work on, and I think that really shone through in all of our designs. Do you have anything? We're like already 10 minutes past, which like isn't surprising me.
I think the like only thing I want to say too is that in the spirit of generosity and what you talked about, this kind of spiritual and artistic openness with responsibility, is to the designers and artists to work in this way. I think it's coming generatively often. I need people saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? If you're not conjuring or able to conjure in the moment and make those, I find it very difficult to work with, because I can't also do that department's work. I need artists and designers who are going, what do we think? What do we think? And I will meet you there and I'll be like, nope, yep. But like, I'm pretty clear when I like something. I'm like, that thing that we did there, we found it. That comes after what you could say is a process of failures of going, nope, yeah, or this. And for producers, it's understand your BIPOC and Indigenous creative leads to ensure you are giving them everything they need to succeed. In this reckoning of coming back after the Black Rebellion, addressing white supremacy in our sector and in our culture, we cannot go back. We will not be going back. Now is not the time to come back, reduce wages, and use scarcity mindset that we don't have any money to pay people. The bottom line should not be designers, artists, and practitioners' well-being to save the sector. That's what made it collapse in the first place. That's what creates racist, inequitable sectors. Do not waste BIPOC people's times when you haven't done the research work, homework, capacity building, and cultural competencies to meet us where we're at. I work very hard. I work very rigorously. Some might say obsessively, but that's because when people like Emily and Daniela and Yolanda and the Fire Company and the Healing Company come into my work, I owe them all of my ancestral protocols around respect and trust and hard work and empathy. And I don't see that happening enough in our sector. We have to have our arts leaders and producers working 3 times as hard. And we've said it, I think you've heard me say this, Emily, a lot of BIPOC people have PhDs in whiteness. We do. And a lot of our theater companies have preschool, kindergarten level educations on how to actually support their BIPOC artists, designers, and people working in international levels. And it's unacceptable. I don't accept the excuse, and I don't accept it if there is no account to say, unfortunately, our white supremacist model will not be able to hold this Indigenous process. Say that to me, but don't position BIPOC artists to be difficult, challenging, or impossible to work with, because the sector wasn't built for us. It's going to take resources, it's going to take equity, and it's going to take a lot of grunt, hard work. And the notion that we will be failing and it will be uncomfortable. There are moments in Kamloops and with Brick where it's uncomfortable. There is discomfort. Working internationally is uncomfortable. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong. But stop wasting BIPOC people's times by not being prepared. And that's something that Emily never even comes close to. More than prepared, more than capable, making generous offers often, and why I will work with Emily for the rest of my life until the next generation comes in. And I'm just so honored that I get to work with you, Emily, and bear witness to your career and ability, because this country has much to learn from you.
Well, thank you, Kim. And I mean, I feel we joke about this sometimes, but you'll just text me and be like, project ? And I'm like, yeah, anyone who's talked to me knows the deep respect and admiration I have for you and your work, and the courage and openness that you inspire in people that work with you. I think that Kamloops changed how a lot of us view theatrical processes and how we approach work going forward in terms of systems, in terms of respect, in terms of methodology. So thank you for that.
Sachanaya, Limalit, thank you.
And thanks everyone for watching. If you've enjoyed this session, please donate to the ADC. Any amount of donation helps. The ADC has worked very hard to get the symposium up, and it would be great to be able to continue doing things like this for the community. There is another event today, which is a round table around animation and other elements being added to live performance. So if you'd like to talk a bit about that, there's still time to sign up. Tomorrow is a big workshop day. We've added a repeat of Elijah Lindenberger's fantastic workshop, which is preparing assets for digital creation. So if you want to check that out, there's still time to sign up. We also then in the afternoon have our first touch designer workshop with Andrew Scriver. So that, I think tomorrow is going to be a really fun day, a lot of learning, a lot of sharing. So you can always check out levelup.designers.ca to sign up for those or any of the events that we have in our final week of the symposium. Very exciting. So thank you all for coming, and I'll see you next time.